Modifying type with Bevel and Emboss. So again, back to the layer styles. We have those layer effects icons that are down here at the bottom of my layer panel. When I click on that, this time let's take a look at what Bevel and Emboss will do for us. I'm going to go ahead and click it to bring up the dialog box. Bevel and Emboss gives us the look of dimension, kind of a look of shine. It's very much dimensional. So we get shadows and highlights, and you can see this has been applied to my type text in red here. So I have the drop shadow previously that I applied, and now I have Bevel and Emboss. Let's just go through a few of these details here. So we have physical properties that we can change up here under structure. So you notice that this first section is structure. The second section here is on shading. So these are all physical properties. The style of bevel or emboss. If we want to do a pillow emboss, you can see it gives you a different feel, less sharp maybe on the top. So we can have an inner bevel, we can have an outer bevel, which this case doesn't really show us a whole lot, and it depends on the font, it depends on the stroke width, it depends on the colors that you've chosen. So there's a lot of things going on here that we can play with. So let's do an inner bevel, and the technique, we can do smooth, we can do chisel hard, and that gives it the appearance that there's actually a top pointed edge. We can do chisel soft, a little bit of an edge but a little softer. So remember that Photoshop is rendering this, and sometimes the rendering takes a lot of memory and can typically do odd things. It doesn't render appropriately or correctly. So be patient in this effect. If you have a little bit of a slower machine, it might take a moment to update. Again, make sure that you have preview selected though. This will give you that preview of what's happening. You also get a preview on a box here, so you can kind of see a little bit better if it's difficult with your text. The depth, of course, is the depth of my bevel in this case, and you can see as I go higher, I get a very much stronger approach. I'm going to bring it back down. All right, and then direction up, direction down. You can see the light source really is what's playing around there. Size and soften. Now the shading, again, I'm using the global light, so I'm using the same light source that I did previously in drop shadow or any other layer effects that I've applied. The angle then determines that light source and where those shadows will fall. The altitude is a visible dimension. The contour here tells us how the light will kind of be reflected in the contour. So it's the contour of that top surface, and you can see the light will be reflected much differently depending on what you select. Default is this first one. And then we have highlight mode, and these are how the pigments are combined. We're using white as our color and screen as the blending mode with an opacity of 50. In our shadows, we're using black with a blending mode of multiply and the opacity of 50 again. So these are just how the pigments are being combined in our highlights and in our shadows. So some really interesting effects that you can apply with the bevel and emboss. The key thing here again, as always, keep it simple. Don't go crazy with it. A little bit goes a long way.